Hey guys, now that I'm on No Limit Hold'em, this is a 6-max game. I've got some requests for playing like live sessions above just heads up, no limit, or beyond that, and also I wanted to share this with my study group of students. So Queen Jack, so I'm just going to go over these kind of one decision point at a time, and then also just sort of discuss I don't know, overarching concepts, some of which I've been working with the guys in the group, and some, well, I mean, all of them will have application beyond that. So, Queen Jack suited ought to be obvious enough and open from the button, and I think the sizing, when we're 75 big blinds, 2.5 times the big blind seems okay as a default from the button. I don't get too much into, should we go 2.5 or 3x, or I think anything between 2 times the big blind from the button to 3x is defendable, can be defended. So one of the things that I've been talking to people about is the importance of note taking, especially on like ignition. You can't really well, any site, some of the sites don't hold your stats for more than a single session, and on what was Bovada and now Ignition, that is the case. You can only hold stats for a single session. It's anonymous, and I think in a tournament format in particular, like a sit and go, the blinds are gonna move pretty fast. Players, I don't know, if you're trying to use a HUD in a situation like this, I don't think it's going to be all that useful, because the players are going to adjust to you. So just because they 3-bet X% does not mean they're going to 3-bet X% against you specifically. And players will change their strategies as the blinds go up and their stacks go up or down. So taking notes and just keeping track of this stuff, I think, is infinitely better than just using a HUD. And in fact, I don't know that there's much value. The only reason I might use a HUD is if I was just like, why not, since I'm using Poker Tracker or something to track my hands anyway. So if I want to have a record where I can go back and look at those hands and I'm recording them to kind of do hand histories and things like that, I'm sure. Beyond that, I don't think the heads-up display is going to be all that useful. By the time you get any kind of a meaningful sample, things are going to change. That's the problem. And plus, it could distract you from just doing what you ought to be doing and taking notes. Now, if you're playing 4 of these at a time, then should you run your HUD? Yeah, but I'm really careful about pretty much stock and whatever your HUD seems to be indicating. So take a lot of notes. Here, I think most people would just make this call 100% of the time and not think much of it. I think it's actually a little bit closer than people might think. I think that under the gun open raising is probably going to have a pretty tight range that 9-10 suited might under-realize against, especially out of position. But if you think that your population is going to be making some mistakes post-flop, like, I don't know, checking back King Jack 4 as pre-flop raiser, and then giving up to a single turn bet, for instance, then you can go ahead and flick in the call. And I mean, I don't think it's going to be an abysmal call or a bad call, even against a good, solid thinking regular, but it's not as good as I think people might think it is. Like, I think if we had a good thinking player under the gun, and we have a hand like 9-8 suited in the small blind, it becomes pretty close. In fact, I think I'd want to know something about the player in the big blind before I made the call. Here's a spot where we've got a bad ace. It folds to the player on the button, and I think player on the button is going to go ahead and open raise. And yeah, he comes in for a min raise. If I had an ace-7 suited, I would make the call. If I had some kind of information about Dylan, that he was very aggressive and or very positionally aware, opened a lot of buttons, and or would overfold his range versus a 3-bet. There's lots of things that would make me want to use this ace 7 offsuit hand as a re-steal, but in general, I want to have a just linear range, especially in these tournaments, especially low stakes tournaments. This is just a $10 sit and go. So I want to just take some minimum cutoff hand and 3-bet that and everything better than it in all of your different categories. And I want to keep my flat calling range pretty small from the small blind, and in fact you could make an argument for not having a flatting range at all. I don't actually agree with that, but I know a lot of really good players do, so I don't think I'm going to get too into that. If you're interested in my thoughts on how we should defend our small blind and why it might make sense to have a flat calling range, you can ask me about it. But you know, the general consensus, I think, among good players is to tend to play 3-bet or fold with a linear range from the small blind. So then if we 3-bet ace 7 offsuit, we're just raising too many hands, even versus a min-raise, I think. So we're definitely going to open this, and I think I was going to do something tricky with sizing and then thought better of it and just went to a 3x open, which, you know, is going to be fine. We face the 3-bet, and just, I don't think I've mentioned this, my tags, like my markers, like that. Yellow is tight passive or weak tight. Orange is tight aggressive. Red, aggro or lag, maniacal. Blue is like a passive calling station, and green is like a regular, like somewhere between a tag and a lag. I used to call it a mag, but I just call it like a thinking red. Or yeah, green could be indicating that my opponent is somewhere between tight aggressive and loose aggressive, but that usually is going to put them in like thinking regular. Going to put them in the thinking regular category, moreover. So you'll see me changing these. Wish there was another thing to call them tags, like because tag means tight aggressive, so I want to have another term for these tags that we're tagging our opponents with, but we'll call them markers. So from now on, these are markers. Yeah, so you'll see me changing from one kind of marker to another pretty often, you know, quite frequently, and you should be doing that, you know, as new information presents itself. But what you won't often see me do is go from like yellow to red, you know, because it's going to take a lot for somebody to convince me that they're weak tight, and then convince me in a single hand that they're not weak tight, but they are in fact a loose aggressive maniac. So usually you'll see me go from like yellow to orange, which means weak tight to tight aggressive, or like blue to yellow, which means like loose passive instead of weak passive, but tight passive, or blue to red, which is like loose passive to loose aggressive. But you know, those things can only tell you so much. These are big chunks of players are going to fall into that same category. So I like to be very specific with my notes. I feel like it keeps me involved in the game. It keeps my mind on the right things. It keeps me from worrying too much about stuff that doesn't matter. And then when I'm in and this is how you ought to be using these notes and using these markers, is when you're in a spot that's kind of close, you can check the markers and make your decision that way. Like here, we could just go ahead and limp in. We could just flick it in, but I believe I had a note. Was it the blue guy? I don't know. I'm thinking the blue guy had limped and folded to an ISO once before. And the guy to my immediate left is not super aggressive, so I don't anticipate he's going to re-steal against my ISO very often. So I think ace high has just got some showdown value, and we're not going to be able to bet the flop and get a lot of better hands to fold, and we won't get called by second best often enough. So I went for the check. When he checks back and his turn card comes, it does give me a little bit of equity in the hand. I've got like two overcards that may be live, and I've got shot. But at that point, it looks like he's not going to be making any betting mistakes. I'm not going to want to really call bets anyway, even if he does. So I think I'm best off just betting to fold out my opponent's equity. It's just better if he folds than if he raises, because I'm not going to want to call his raise, you know. Bets instead of raises, yeah. Like, I don't want to check call, I'd rather bet fold. And even though it's probably the case I'm not going to get called by very many second best hands, and I'm not going to get folds from many better hands, I still think, especially out of position, we're better off just cleaning out the equity and not free rolling our opponent to either make a bet we can't call or to hit a card that beats us that he would have folded had we bet. And it would be fantastic if your opponents could always make mistakes against the options that you choose to take, but it won't always be the case. So it's important to not make mistakes yourself unless you're able to induce a bigger mistake. Don't make mistakes. And when I'm talking about mistakes, I'm talking about the fundamental theorem of poker. Now, this is an interesting hand. So villain opens, I 3-bet. His marker's white, meaning I don't really have a great read on him. But it goes check on flop because I do have showdown value. I don't think I can get called by worse. I don't think I can get better hands to fold. Same thing on the turn. He checks, I check back happily. Kind of happy he didn't bet. The ace comes, he bets. And this is a spot where I think I'm ahead, like, almost always. There just aren't many hands that villain can have here that beat me, that are just going to check down to the river and then make a half pot bet on the river. So I think I really could consider raising, and I know I did consider raising. And if he's got a bluff, which I think he will have a lot, then the raise doesn't make any difference. We're just going to win the same amount, but we don't open him up to coming back over the top of us. And just thinking about the hands that, I mean, definitely I'm ahead a lot in that spot, almost always, probably like 90% of the time. But that's not the question. The question has to be, will I still be ahead once I raise and get called? And even if you think that's the case, you also have to factor in what happens when my opponent comes over the top. Am I going to be able to call profitably, or will I have to fold? And is he capable of doing that as a bluff? Will he ever do it like for value? Are we going to like that spot? That should have some kind of something to do with it. And then the other thing is the ICM considerations. When you're playing six-handed and two of the players get paid, you're starting the tournament already very near the bubble. So bubble pressure and ICM kicks in, and that makes it more important to not lose chips than it does to gain chips. So even though looking back on it, I can say that that might have been a missed opportunity, I don't think it's too bad, because it's probably just a very, it's a thin value bet, and there might be some other repercussions, like maybe sometimes I get raised, which would put me in a bind. And more than anything, it's the higher variance line that's not adding a lot of EV, and so the ICM consideration, the independent chip model, like not how much value, like not how many chips am I going to win, but what's the utility, like how much does it hurt me or help me in terms of making money in this tournament? You know, what's it going to do to my chip stack? If I lose that pot compared to if I win those couple other chips, the utility value of the chips that I would gain by getting an extra little bet called is, you know, maybe not worth that much compared to the chances of either losing a big pot or having to fold, which definitely probably is the best hand. And just, you know, when you're playing in a format where a full 1/3 of the players get paid something, there is a lot of value in just not losing your chips. So when we're playing in a tournament like this, the game plan should not be to go after every chip in play and push really small edges, because think of it like this: if you were in a cash game and you won every chip in play and you went to cash them out, you would get full value. But in a situation, and if you're in a cash game and you played 6 ways and eventually you lost all of your chips, but you lost all of your chips after everybody lost all of theirs, you know, so you lost all your chips to the first place guy, but everybody else busted first. Well, in a cash game scenario, if you cashed out with all the chips, you get all the money, and if you're the last one to get busted, you're still busted and have no money. So both of those things enter in and create not only a mathematical incentive to not getting busted or losing chips, but also you get mathematically penalized for winning all the chips in play, or just winning chips. So both of those things, you know, and it really is, you really do get penalized in terms of mathematics for winning every chip. Like, you won all of the chips, but you don't get all of the money, so you get penalized for winning all of the chips. So you shouldn't be playing the same kind of strategy that you'd play if every chip just had a 1-to-1 dollar value ratio. That said, I still think it was close. And you know, in game, I know I struggled with it. I talked with the guys from the group, and I think that I don't know if we ever reached consensus, but I think at least one of the, maybe we did. Maybe the consensus is that we decided that probably was a raise for value, because our opponent reps ace queen so hard. Like, he has ace queen, or he has ace queen there often, and we're definitely going to get paid off by ace queen. And he shouldn't have that many bluffs, and he shouldn't have many value hands, so I don't think we're going to get raised very often. Probably not often enough to really worry about it. And we should really be probably focusing on just getting that extra value from hands like ace queen and maybe ace 10. What else? Oh, okay, I think one of the guys in the group was asking about this hand. So, we are playing 12 big blinds effective. Yeah, and we get pocket fours. I think this is definitely the right play. We want to put pressure on these guys. I don't know what else we'd do with it, because like, if we just min-raised, we're going to have to call anyway if we get jammed on, and we don't want to go post-flop with it, so we want to get as many folds as we can. So any spot, and I guess this is the thing that should clear up any ambiguity, is if you're in a spot where you would prefer to take the pot down pre-flop, but you will, well, in any spot, really. Okay, at whatever decision point you're at, you're making an aggressive action where you would prefer to just take the pot down there, but you know that you're committing yourself to stacking off if you get jammed on, then you ought to just move all in. If you're going to bet, it should be all in, because if I make a non-all-in raise, then have to call a jam, then what I'm doing is I'm giving my opponent an additional strategic option. I'm allowing him to decide whether he wants to look at the flop first and then decide if he wants to play for the rest of the money, or if he has a strong enough hand that he can just jam, then he can jam knowing that I'm stuck to playing. And in fact, in this case, I would be stuck to playing, and I don't want to play. You know, I would prefer to just take the money. And that spot that I was in, ace-jack suited against pocket fours, is as close to a 50-50 as you're going to get. So obviously, I'd much rather just take the blinds down. But at the same time, I'd be making a big mistake if I folded to a raise. Like if I raised to 3 times a big blind with 1.5 big blinds already in the pot, and like the small blind moves in for 12 bigs total, there's no way I can fold. My pot odds are too good. So if I can't fold because my pot odds would be too good, and I don't want to actually go post-flop if I can avoid it, then usually you want to just move in. And actually, I think maybe I'll do a proof, or maybe not a proof. Maybe I'll take a look and just do the math on that situation to make sure that I still agree with it. Okay, so ace queen suited, obviously we're going to open that. I think min raising is good. It gets pretty weird with these kinds of stack sizes to do some kind of raise that's not a min raise and not all in, and I don't want to move all in against this guy. So here, if this guy folds, I'm going to have to call. Pot odds are going to dictate that, you know, even though this guy has, my notes on him say that he has a limping range and he has different sizes that he will open for, and that his bet sizing seems to be correlated to his hand strength. Big bet, big hand. So I'm not going to be happy about stacking, but I will stack. But now, once he makes this shove, and then he makes a small re-raise, which commits him to calling if I jam, by the way. But looks like he's really just trying to isolate this guy, or maybe he could even be trying to reduce lighter calls. So he's going to have a strong range here. He knows he's got 0 fold equity against this guy. He should know that this guy has been playing tight and probably has a big hand based on making a bigger bet. And it's the first time this guy's jammed. He's jamming with 3 players yet to act. I've already opened from under the gun. So all of those things make this, I think, a pretty good fold. And it turns out that I was up against kings and queens, so it actually was a pretty good fold. And I think that without paying attention, if I wasn't paying attention, if I was just playing and not taking notes and not trying to figure out who's who, I probably would have ended up not folding. I would have probably just got the money in pre-flop. If I thought this guy was loose and aggressive, and I thought this guy was loose and aggressive, and I didn't realize that, you know, the way that I didn't realize what was actually going on because of the reads I had, then I definitely could have lost more money there. In fact, almost always would have lost more money. So yeah, we went for the call here. It was a min-raise. We were getting odds. We flopped top pair. Check call. Nothing we can really do about that. And lucky for us, Villain completely overplayed his hand and busts himself out of the tournament by running his bluff catcher. He turned his bluff catcher into a bluff, I guess. He had a pair that had good showdown value, and he should have been betting a pretty polarized range, but instead he was betting a hand that would basically never get called by worse and probably would not get better hands to fold. So he made a big mistake, and we were the pair that was in the pot with him when he did. So his mistake money goes to us. So ace-2 offsuit, we're going to raise, but the question becomes, can we min-raise and fold? And if not, then should we just jam? And I think it's close, but I think we can min-raise and fold. That we shouldn't be able to min-raise and fold with the stacks, but I think we can fold against this guy. Of course we can't fold against him. It's just an unfortunate situation, but probably our open was plus EV to begin with, and definitely we can call. And it turns out we actually got the money in a HUD somehow, so it was really a bad play for Villain here, I think. Yeah, I mean, he should have known we weren't folding to him. And Jack 10 is not even a favorite against a random hand. Or, yeah, it might be. It's close, though. I mean, like, mediocre, the average, the mean, what is it? Yeah, the mean hand is Queen 7, and Jack 10 offsuit is a little bit of a dog to Queen High. Then if you just put in like a random range, or if you get any range that you can assign anybody who's thinking at all, he's going to have Jack 10 beat when they open the button in a way that doesn't allow them to fold to the short stacks jam. Okay, so here's an interesting thing that just happened. We saw this guy open folded, which is really, really good news. When I've got 5,600, they've each got 1,500, so they've each got just over 10 bigs, and I've got. I thought I had more than this when we were talking about this situation earlier. Maybe it'll get that way. I'm sure it will. So these guys should be in a folding war, right? They're going to have a really hard time taking whatever stack of chips they have against me heads up, with the blinds where they are. It's going to be really hard for them to beat me. Even if they're equally skilled or better at heads up play, they're just a real big dog. But they can make sure that they lock up second place if they just fold and let the other player get involved. So whichever one of these guys, here's the thing, I guess this is the best way to describe it. If Villain, it's this guy here, number 2, if this guy here watches us get all in pre-flop, he makes a lot of money just by us being all in, right? So if one of these guys calls, calls a jam, it gives the other guy automatic equity. And where does that equity come from? It doesn't come from me. And here we have to suck out. And do we suck out? 32 and fact suck out. So that was, what was that so far? I busted 2 guys just by holding the deck. 1 guy to a suck out, is that right? Well, I got all of them. So yeah, I think there were 3 holds and a suck out. But, you know, they weren't really big pots anyway. The all-in pot here wasn't that big. So yeah, this guy was in a very good position when this guy got all of his money in against him, because he's got an opportunity to lock up second place without even having to gamble. He doesn't have to put his own stack at risk. So that's why those 2 should have been very, very tight against my shoves, and I think they probably were. I just happened to run into one of the hands that can call me. Even when I do with my king high, I'm not going to do that. I mean, against ace 10, my king 4 was probably like 30-some%, 36%, something like that, 37%. Far from dead. So this was, damn, I should have stopped and go back and watch that hand. I think it's interesting. I feel like in game I felt like I misplayed the hand. Like I should have sized my raise on the flop a little bit bigger to give me a little bit more fold equity on the flop, and then to give me a pot-sized jam on the turn. So whatever, it worked out. You know, I made an over-bet jam by a little bit, which, you know, could have been fine. Yeah, I mean, it could have been fine. It keeps his calling range, continuing range a little bit weaker on the flop when I check those smaller, which allows me to over-bet jam the river or the turn and get better fold equity while locking up some money in the pot. So, I even thought about turning it into a triple barrel, but I think that's the worst. Definitely the worst barrel. Gross spot, but like we would have bet any king, we would have bet, you know, we definitely have something when we play this hand. We've got some kind of showdown value, and if it would have been a king, I would have bet it by that point. So we're pretty much at the top of our range, and we're getting 3-1, so I don't think we can fold. I mean, we could, but it would be exploited. I mean, we could have maybe folded him just thinking he's always got it because he very rarely bluffs, and if he was going to bluff, he wouldn't have done it that way. But that's a lot of maybes. That's a lot of assumptions. And definitely we had enough. We were high up. We were high enough up in our range to make that call. Especially given, you know, he bet half pot, which gives us 3-1 pot odds. And probably we can beat all of his bluffs, and we're going to lose to all of his value bets. So it was just a simple puller versus bluff catcher scenario where we should be calling with X%, folding X% of our hands. I think we're going to have some. We'll have a lot of worse hands, actually. Yeah, that's an interesting spot. I think I'd like to analyze that a little bit. Maybe I made a mistake there. I might not have been high up enough in my range. My range was very narrow, for one. So a lot of it's going to be like 10x, but I think some of those turn into 2 pairs. And I don't have many hands that aren't 10x. You know, maybe I'll have like pocket 9s. Yeah, like probably I should have folded. I don't think I have enough folds there. Yeah, it's interesting though when you think you just played so good throughout the entire tournament, and then you go back and look at some of these spots and realize that, you know, even when we have a really good game, it's very rare, if ever, the case that we play our very best game and do everything we know to do, or would know to do if we could slow it down a little bit. And that's why off-table study is so important. Going through these spots when you're off the table, you can look at it more clearly, get other people's input and advice. So I really think you guys ought to do that. Take me up on this, right? Do your free lesson with me. Then we've got a study group. I can throw you into the study group on some kind of a trial basis. I'm thinking eventually I'll have some kind of a price that if you just want to be part of the study group, you know, like $30 a month, but it comes with a free hour of coaching, something like that. But for right now, if you want to just do your free lesson and I can explain to you what this group is, and the group only gets better and stronger and better, more valuable for the people that are involved, the more people come in. So yeah. But I guess that's it, guys. Until next time, Navinad over and out. Good quote, L-U-C-K, end quote.